Good afternoon. Yes, I'm Srinivasan Shankar. You can call me Sri. So I'm working as a lecturer since 2007 in Ghana. I started to teach at All Nations for 4 years, from 2007 to 2012. Then I moved to University of Ghana from 2012 still now. I did my master's when I came to Ghana. So after my master's, I had gained experience of teaching here. Then when I got the chance to work in the university, and there it's demand that you need to do your PhD to continue your lectureship. So luckily I got a PhD admission in the department. I finished my PhD there at UG and started working as a lecturer there since 2021 as a full-time lecturer. Before, once you are doing as your studies in UG, they don't allow you to teach there. So luckily, I also got a lab technician job there, working as a lab technician at Department of Biochemistry, which is a WACBIP, West African Center for Cell Biology and Infectious Pathogens. It's a newly World Bank funded project. So I worked with Professor Gordon Wandari as a lab technician for 10 years, and simultaneously I also doing my PhD work. So I was teaching bioinstrumentation for 15 years. So I've assisted a lot of students who are currently working in institutions like Rich Hospital, Kolibo Teaching Hospital, Conformacy Teaching Hospitals. You can see other institutions. Those are my products. So here I'm going to talk about regulatory affairs, especially developing medical devices in Ghana. So you may ask the question, like, you are a lecturer, how are you able to choose such topic to do this thing? So since last year, I also am appointed as a technical advisory committee member for FDA. So FDA has Food and Drugs Board authorities in Ghana. They have something called a medical device unit. So in the medical device unit, where they are trying to take imported medical devices or the manufacturing medical devices in country to get approved for license them. And before they are licensed, they have a lot of procedures, and they have exposed these techniques, and I've got the knowledge from them. So today I'm trying to discuss whatever the regulatory issues happening in this country. To see, as a young biomedical engineers, you have a lot of alien ideas, like you may always have to solve some problem. You don't look for something very affordable solution. Some choose to do affordable solution, some choose to do an expensive solution, but not all the solutions will be passed through the FDA one. So I will try to show what is happening at the FDA side and the regulations, why some able to pass through the regulatory checks and why they are failed, and what actually they are doing it, and how they are going to help you when you have innovative idea. It move from bench to prototype, prototype to a manufacturing medical device, and manufacturing medical device to application in a hospital. I'm sure you all heard about this FDA, right? It has been amended. It's a legal framework for medical device regulations in Ghana. When they say the legal framework, which means it's a law given to a country, according to the Ministry of Health, they have received that law that, please, now we have a lot of hospitals, so many medical devices in the country, and try to regulate them. They follow their standards. Before that, we also have the standards like Europe Union standards, US standards, and Asian standards. When those medical devices get into our country, sorry to say that I'm country because I'm naturalized as a Ghanaian. So don't take it. I'm part of here, I'm also part of the other side. But my family is coming from Ghana. So in our country, it's not like someone can walk inside the country and start to sell any medical devices and leave us in middle and run away like that. When they are selling the medical device, they must make sure they take the responsibility of it. For example, if you look around the stethoscope all the way to the surgical theater equipments, everything must be responsible by a person who is not just selling it. Make sure it are able to deliver the function for the patients. Because everyone sitting here, they are potential to be a patient. And if you are not taking responsible of those medical devices you are designing it, you end up having that same device into your bedside. So we have to follow that regulation. And that's how the governing bodies have brought this law that in the year of 1996, 1992, Food and Drug Boards was established. And they have a serious law on it. and that law act of 5 to 3 1996, and later it has been developed in 2012. They added other things like part 6 tobacco control measures, part 7 for FDA, which is food and drug authorities, and then part 8 is a clinical trials, which means if you bring any devices inside the country, it must be passed through the clinical trials and have that report. Using the report, then you apply for the licensing your device. And then they make sure the purpose of FDA is not to threat anyone or not to stop entering the innovation inside the country. Rather, they want to enforce the standards you are following in the manufacturing process. For example, if you produce certain medical devices not in a sterile environment, and it may be packed nicely, labeled well, when we are applying for the patients, due to poor sterilizations, it can cause infection for the patient. It end up of that infections can spread around for him. So that's why they want to enforce whatever medicinal products. According to the Food and Drugs Board, it covers everything, including food, cosmetics, all chemicals you are using it. So here, the medical devices are household chemical substances when they are using for the patient. It may be for diagnosis, or it may be for treatment, or it may be for something and alternative functions. It must be passed through this FDA documents. So when you visited FDA, they have a long organogram. They have food, as I said, the chemicals. They also have other things. But I just chunked one for the medical devices. Of course, they have the CEO, Chief Executive Officers for that. Then they have the people who work under the CEO is the Deputy Chief Executive Officers. They are meant for health products and technology. Anything health products, you can name it. The moment when I health products, any products, for example, if I have a table here, if I move this table all the way to the surgical theater, then it belongs to then a health product. And the table you are seeing it right now, you are using for a desk purpose. But when I move to the hospital, I must be provide the sterilization certificate for it. I must be provide the vibrational assessment of it. I must provide the material which I choose to make this manufacture on these things. And now it has a health product. So they have a team which is under the CEO of FDA, comes to the health product and technologies. They have their director who handle the medical device directorate. And under that, they have a HOD who have the medical device department, and they have device unit. They have unit 1, unit 2, unit 3. Why they have the unit 1s like different units? Because medical devices are vast numbers. You can name different kind of medical devices, but they fall under some classifications. So for example, if you look around the condoms, the male condoms or female condoms, they are medical devices. They are using it. If it's using for birth control, they can classify it as 1. It's just for birth control. But the moment it's using for sexually transmitted devices, it moved to classification 2. So as you say, the stethoscope where you are using it, or the theater lamp where you are using it, depend on them, the classifications will happen. So you have something called unit 1, which meant for low risk involved medical devices. So any medical devices, when you look around, is not just getting inside the body, rather outside it. It's used for screening purpose. It's on a unit 1. If it's low risk and move it to the moderate risk, something you can use it, but if you are not performing well, if you are not using well, it may introduce some other damages. It may be a second unit 2, that is a moderate one. And then we have a device 3, which is high classification. Like in a devices you are using it, it may be an invasive, and that invasive can perform some surgery before you implant them, like a stent. They are high complex medical devices which fall under the device unit 3. So we have 3 different units, and a couple of engineers are working on unit 1, unit 2, unit 3 to make sure the devices they are receiving it, to classify them and work on that to give the license for that or not. Like when you get to your license authority offices, how we have class A, class B, class C. Someone who can drive the cycle, you have a license. Someone who drives the bike, they have their own license. Someone who is driving personal car is different from someone who are driving the heavy vehicle trucks. Like the same way they classify here. And more important, when they receive their documentations, they have something called a Center for Laboratory Service and Research. That's why your medical devices taken inside there to perform their tests or confirm the test report generated by the manufacturers, and they also perform it to cross-check whether the values are same. And the values are matched or the values are contradict going up and down, they will let the manufacturers to know that these are the things we got it. And if it's still there's some challenges, their values are not matched on it, according to the safety aspect, they may pass or they can fail depending on the CEO's final result. Sorry. So if you look around the medical device departments, they have a unit called MDCHC, which means medical device, cosmetic, and household chemical substance. So medical device is not under a common one. They are sharing a cosmetic and household chemical substance because that's how they started. Initially, when they are trying to set up most of the creams, toothpaste, all these things, they are using toothbrushes, household chemicals. They have the same testing procedures. So they joined together with the medical devices and the household chemicals to have the directorate unit. And under the MDD, as I mentioned, we have 3 units. One stands for the low-risk medical devices. Low-risk medical devices, no need any clinical trials. For example, toothpick or dental brush or some kind of tongue depressors, they are low medical devices. It's not going to cause any secondary damages, purposely for examination. Even examination glasses, they are like low risk one. If the same glasses I'm using for surgery, it belongs to a surgical glasses, then it moves to the high risk one. So we have medium to high risk medical devices, and unit 3, which is very complex. There the engineers have a lot of works to work on it to make sure how complex it is, they have meet their standards. Something called IVDs, in vitro diagnostic test kits, which belongs to their unit 3. Softwares for medical devices. If you work on any hospitals, they use medical imaging devices along with the software, because the moment they take the X-ray, they have the software which is going to make the decision for that one, whether there's a cancer or there's a benign cancer or malignant cancers or there's a breakages in bone, depend on the software outcome. And they also have something called on-site verification. Some devices, they can't move it to inside the lab. So rather they make the engineers or the inspectors to reach the on-site to verify the system, whether the X-ray, the mounted X-rays are matched according to their standards. It's always a question like anytime when we ask students what is medical devices, they can tell so many things, but if you ask them what actually the medical devices. So according to their standards, reference to any instruments or an apparatus. A specimen collection apparatus is a medical devices, or a tool forceps you are using is a medical devices. So these are standard explanations, or machine or procedures or implant or in vitro reagents, anything related, even articles. That articles is going to give you information about how to determine whether it's a positive or negative, is a medical devices. Or sometimes components, they can also be in a medical devices. Recognized in official national formulary or pharmacopoeia, which is a popular in Europe side or in America, pharmacopoeia, which forms under the Pharmaceutical Council, or any supplements to them. Sometimes if you use a devices that meant for diagnosis of disease or any other conditions, in cure, sometimes mitigations. Mitigation means mimicking some function that you use it. For example, those who have implants, cochlear implant, it mitigates the hearing function. Or prevention of disease in both human being like a man or in a veterinary of animals. Sometimes it also intend to affect the structure. Some kind of devices not meant for medical devices, it should not use any chemicals. For example, I can't use bronchodilator considered as a medical devices. Bronchodilator is something they use it for an asthma patient, it needed for treatment. So you can see the compressed system and the drug is inside. The moment when the drug get into that devices, I can't make it as a medical devices, because it's the drug is the one entering inside the lungs and make the treatment. Or any drug that is going to metabolize to achieve the principle of medications is not meant for medical devices. As I mentioned, we have classes. They know that some places they use class 1, class 2, and they also have subdivisions in class 2 as class 2A, class 2B. But in Ghana, we are using class 2, class 3, and class 4. As you see, low, which means we don't need any much clinical trial reports on it. It's something easy to manufacture, and it is easy to pack them, and they can use it for medical, like glouses, cotton swabs, or bandages, plasters, considered as on a low risk level. And the second ones, you can see the low to moderated, quite the risk level will be changed on it. I will explain what is the risk they are using here. And then moderate risk to high risk, and class 4 is very high risk. Something they are fall or they are not careful on that one, it may cause a serious fatal damages to the patient. Risk-based classifications. Risk in the sense, intent to use of the devices, where I'm intention to use on it. Am I using it on the patient, and how am I using it? If I'm using it to the surface of the patient, or I'm using it inside the patient. So intention of the user of devices, risk to the patients. Sometimes some medical devices, when not only patient oriented, it also user oriented. As when a surgeon is performing some surgery using certain needles, some certain switches, certain devices, it can also be in a counter effect. It may damage to the patient, the users. Or the degree of invasiveness. How degree are you using it? We have switches material. They are used to switch the outer surface, or some switching materials, they are used to switch the deep wounds inside, or some switches, they can be meant for switch deep organs and absorbable. So the switcher material will be absorbed and degraded, or some switches just to hold it, or some switches just for the surface. So where the degree of invasiveness, the risk will change. And then the durations. Some devices, they are meant for a long time. For example, pacemakers, you have to meant for a long time. Or if you use for cochlear implant, is meant for a long time. Or some devices, they can keep it for temporary, for example, cardiovert or defibrillator for temporary. Or some devices, they can keep it for certain duration, like even stitching materials, they can stitch and leave it for some few weeks. So depend on how long this devices is going to be implanted or where they are using it, the risk will change on that one. So based on this risk, they are classifying the equipment. So categories of medical devices based on the classification rules, we have something called invasive devices. Anything get surgery and bring them inside the body is an invasive one. And there's some no need to be invasive, like they can keep outside, take something from your body and connect it to the machine outside, perform the functions. A non-invasive one. There are some, they can implant it and release the radiations, or they can use the electrical energy to trigger or stimulate them and release a certain treatment procedures. Active devices. Implants like stents or cannulas or cochlear implants, even including the lens, intraocular lens. These are the implants one. And another one where they take the a specimen from the human body, maybe like in a body fluids like saliva, serum, or cerebrospinal fluids, and they perform these procedures outside, is in vitro diagnostic devices. Sometimes we also have a challenges one, they can use invasive and non-invasive to create a combination devices. For example, we have all seen this disposable syringes. When you take the disposable syringes, the container alone, it's a class 1. Just because the needle get in top of it, the needle is a class 2 because it's an invasive one. By bringing there a class 1 and a class 2, now because of the class 2 is very higher one, consider the needles are a class 2 division. I think you're all familiar with this pacemaker images, right? Invasive medical devices. Right now in the country, we are getting more number of pacemakers in Ghana. Before, like few years before, it's very few, maybe like surgeries like 1 or 2 happens in a week. But right now, 30 to 50 surgeries are just happening like UGMC, Kolibu, other cardiothoracic centers. Because pacemakers, 1, the price of the pacemaker has gone down, and 2, now there's several ways people can import the pacemakers. And we also have a lot of cardiac surgeons, their hands are becoming very, comfortable in the sense of implanting the pacemakers. So the moment the pacemaker get into the country, we have a way of how to classify them here. to help and control the heartbeat. You all know that pacemakers have different types. Some pacemakers are fixed one, which means the beats are very fixed. But some pacemakers, they monitor your heart capacity. The moment when your natural capacity is get lower, then the pacemaker will start to kick them and give you the strong pulse to keep you alive. And there are different types, depend on after the ECG test and other procedures, we realize that the type of pacemakers the person needed. But in general, pacemaker considered as to help to control the heartbeat and prevent the heart from beating too slow. That's how my lectures has taught us. Pacemaker function is to make sure the person's heartbeat has to be faster. If your heartbeat is 30 to 60, it's considered as a low heartbeat, something like a bradycardia. With that low heart rate, it can't pump the blood all the way from legs to your head. So they need the energy. That's how they use the electrical stimulation system to devise as a pacemaker. It gives the shock. Anytime when the electrical shock is there, then the pumping action will take on it. Since it demands a surgical procedures and surgically invasive, of course we have two types of pacemaker here. External ones, still you need to perform a surgery to fix the electrode. And complete pacemaker, they have to do a open heart surgery to place the electrode at a particular place and provide the leads. Sometimes the leads can also be connected outside of the surface, or they can do a surgery to place the lead inside the surface. And the leads also different types. There may be a flat type of the leads or sometimes barbed wire kind of the lead. That's not the problem here. The moment when we do invasive procedures, so it's considered as a class 4 division. And here, pacemakers can also perform something like a diagnosis. It diagnoses what the conditions you have, and it can also monitor, and your doctor knows that how your heart beats on it. And at the same time, it can control and correct the beats. And apart from that, it can also detect the central cardiovascular systems. And we also have another one called the mechanical heart valves. If you open the books and if you open the patterns, there are so many new designs of mechanical heart valves, unidirectional, bidirectional types. Since it also demands a open heart surgery to fix this valve and stitch them and monitor it. There are different types of valves. And it also falls under the class 4. And the mechanical valve provides a controlled flow of blood in single directions. And they are doing a cleft palate surgeries. They want to stitch it back. They can use the stitches. They have different types of stitches. Some stitches for external knot, which can take too much pressure. So the gauge will be very higher. Some stitches are deep inside. They don't need a bigger hole. So the stitcher thickness are very light one. Since a surgical invasive device that intend to absorb by a body, the stitches which has to be absorbed by your body because of the materials, they can use certain kind of polymer materials as the stitches give you the grip holding it. After the water starts to absorb, hydrolysis will happen and it can break the thread off and healing take places. No need in a secondary surgery to remove the stitches again. So this one, since it is going to stay for 30 consecutive days, it's considered as a class 3. And then we also have metallical bone implants. There are some kind of accidents, cranial surgeries, where they can replace with the titanium skull or some kind of metal rods or some kind of bone screws that need considered as an implant. It can stay, sometimes it can stay 30 days or more than 30 days. So they considered as a class 2. And we also have something called intraocular lens, which need an implant where they perform the surgery, fix the lens on it. Depending on the durations, is a class 3 one. We have something called female and male condoms, as they are reduce the risk of sexually transmitted disease and other HIV transmission. You are aware of the sexually transmitted disease like gonorrhea and what other infections? Syphilis, venereal, like you can name it. The problem with this disease, we don't have vaccine for that one. And when it gets to the person, what will happen? Immune suppressed patients, they have challenges on that one. So here the condom is not a birth preventive one, rather is preventing from the infection. So sterility issues and the same time stability of this material, and where they are using invasive, not necessarily for the surgery. So it's considered as an invasive medical device and class 3. Other things like a lancet. Lancet, if you look around the design of the lancet, they can take any stainless steels or nichrome material, they can cut and created the tip which is very sharp edges. As a metal is considered as class 1. Because the sharp tips in a very microsecond is going to puncture your body, created a blood fuse out of it. Just for that contact is considered as a class 2 here. All surgical invasive devices are classified as class 2 here to make puncture and obtain small bloodstream. And at the same time, catheters, you can look at patients who can't walk or the patients who are in the intensive care units, they have different kind of catheters. I mean, the one for urinary catheters, they mount inside the urethra and try to drain the urine outside. And since it's going to stay in their patient, it's in a class 2 devices. And another one for endotracheal tube during the some kind of strokes or some kind of conditions where the person can't breathe, they put the endotracheal tube and transmitted their oxygens through the system or the food, everything. And that is going to stay in their body, is also been a class 2 divisions here. We have so many, but just I selected some few like contact lens, dental braces or condoms, all considered as a class 2 here. When it's come for class 1, you can look around the tongue depressors. And rules are very important here. If you look around the FDA, they have published this rule book, 65 pages rule book. Any medical devices, you can have discussion like, no, this is class 1 or class 2. But the rule book clearly shows that according to this rule, any invasive device that penetrates the body through the body orifice, for example, tongue depressors pass through the mouth, or the otoscopes are passed through the opening of your ears, and then intent for just to look around. We are not doing anything, just for visualizations to see inner ear infections or throat infections. That must be in a class 1. And it is not going to stay forever. And this doesn't need any surgical procedure here. And more popular one, like in a dental examinations, the moment you get to the dental clinics, they perform dental hand tools like surgical and examination procedures, but they are not something is going to cause any infection on here. Extraction forceps, surgical sets or pallet sets, all these things are considered as a class 1. Dialysis unit. So when you look around the dialysis unit, it is supposed to be an invasive one, but here they classified as a non-invasive one. Why? What was the reason? Every average biomedical engineer will challenge us. This is an invasive because you are trying to bring the blood all the way from outside, process them, filter them, and then send it back to that. But why people are using non-invasive? Because manufacturers are very smarter one. They are just using some pumps and make these devices non-invasive so they can get the approval for the country. But the catheters, the one which is going to set the cannula and catheters, which is not necessarily manufactured by dialysis unit. It is a third party who manufacture them and range over for the FDA regulations. So since the catheter is going to drain the blood, it is their problem. As I mentioned, how needle as joined to the cylinder became a class 2. So here the dialysis manufacturers are just saying that my dialysis only to pump the blood, process them, filter them. So when we are going for the FDA licensing for dialysis unit, someone will come for a class, the licensing for sodium bicarbonate. Someone will be doing for the licensing for the dialysis agent. Someone will do for the acid, and someone will do for the catheters. Then the dialysis machine people will bring their dialysis machine. So, but when in the hospitals, they buy as a collective one. They don't buy as only dialysis machine. They need everything here. So this considered as a non-invasive. Why? Because FDA has clearly said a non-invasive device intent for modifying the biological or chemical composition of blood or any body fluid, introduce them to the body by means of infusions. Some kind of infusion pumps also part of it. So most of the dialysis manufacturers, they don't produce dialysis, they also produce infusion pumps. And they use it for administration. However, these devices, they are just taking things, filter them, collect the protein, separate them, and send it back to them. So their worry is all about processing it. They don't think how it comes on it. And another non-invasive, you can see most of your laboratories like centrifuge. These centrifuges are different types. If you work in a research laboratory, there are centrifuges like a refrigerated one, non-refrigerated one, slanting one, or sometimes high speed, low speed, even ultra high speed centrifuges. But they all considered as a class 2. The concept of centrifuges, yeah, let's take an example in the hospitals. If you look around the national blood transfusion units, they use a lot of these centrifuges to separate the platelets from the blood, which is collected from the donor. And just they are separating, everything is happened outside it. But at the same time, it's also considered as a class 3 because any unsterile procedures can introduce something to the blood or something to that platelet. When you are transferred to the patients, you may end up having the fetal. So according to their rule number 6, a non-invasive device intended to modifying the biological or chemical composition here, especially the blood or other body fluid, purposely to introduce in your body by means of infusions or other means of administrations. People who are having fire cases, those who are having the fire accident cases, they demand the platelets. So all they are not worried about the A group or B group. They need a platelets. So they try to use this separation technique to get the plates and give it to the patient. Sterile gauze, blood bags, or centrifuges. So sterile gauze, all we know that to dress and protect the wound. All non-invasive devices that are intended to come in contact with the injured skin. So since it's contacting the injured skin means it's opened. So if the sterile gauze, as they have mentioned the word sterile, if they failed of sterility and they introduce this device, it can cause infection on it. It can delay the healing process. So the moment, if you use the gauze just for dressing is a different. But if you use the gauze which you take some drug and keep them around the wound inside, then it's on a class 2 here. And the blood bags are more like in a collection. Some of the containers, like sample collection containers, they must be very careful. If I'm selling a blood bags and this blood bags have some level of leakages, I mean, if you fill or the way you handle, you know the blood bags can go for different temperature. While you are collecting the blood, the temperature is different. When you are storing them in a refrigerator, the temperature is different. So the bags can go for expansions of heat expansion and cool expansion. Some poor manufacturers just looking for a cheaper polymers, they can damage it. And if they are not careful, when they are taking the blood bags from their container, it can damage and leak out of these things. So they must be answer all these things. Yeah, there are so many devices we can talk about that, but let's start from there. I mean, few we can capture here. The cotton wool. This is used for cleaning the wounds, and a device intended to use in a mechanical barrier or compressions for absorptions of exudations, and it's considered as a class 1 here. Another popular like active medical devices. As I mentioned, any devices is going to add some gas or take some gas using the electricity to create some kind of changes in your body. I mean, considered as an active medical devices. Most popular one is a ventilator used to move breathable air in and out of the patients. There are different kind of ventilators, ventilator working modes, but that's not the problem here. This devices is trying to interfere with your normal breathing system, right? Sometimes if your breathing is okay, fine, but the breathing is not that stronger. The ventilator is trying to push it harder and take it out of it. And since it's going to change anything in your body, or anesthesia machines, which means they are having a certain drug, releases time to keep the patients in out of conscious control. And that drug is entering in your body, and they also control the ventilation of it. So it's considered as a class 4 here. It's not stopped there. Active medical devices like an X-ray machine, because I'm using a radiation here, I must be very careful with the radiations. If I set the Coolidge tube, I made mention this is the maximum radiation you can get. But due to something, the power fault or something they didn't follow the standards, the radiation level is beyond the examination procedure. Rather, you are taking scanning or you are taking images, rather introduce a cancer condition for the patient. So radiations, we have to be very serious on it. Like as you mentioned here, X-ray machines, mammograph, laser systems, or magnetic resonance images, all considered as like in a class 3. Why? Because here is very complex and at the same time using for an imaging purpose. And if something is wrong, it can reverse the patient conditions. Not necessarily you are, for example, CT scans, if you expose a particular patient more than twice, you are introducing the conditions that is going to cause a cancer for the patient. So it falls under the class 2. I have.
So then you know that I'm break for lunch at 1:30.
Okay, what's the time now?
I think it's 12:30.
Okay, I will finish it. Ultrasound, which you are all familiar about it, where you use it for the fetal studies, and you can also study about the blood vessels. You can use it for other procedures. If I want to set the endotracheal tube, I want to set the cannula, I want to set the IV line, people are using it POS type of ultrasound. But the problem with the ultrasound is, when it's looked for, you can use it for internal organs, but when it's come for the fetal one, so that's where the complexity is there. If you use a certain radiation, certain sound level beyond the range of examinations, you can damage the organ, the fetal organs of it. So they have to be very careful of this thing. And apart from all this active gadgets, it comes with a software, and the software is the one making decision for that one. So FDA also have to work on it, that level of the software they have designed and the algorithms which run to make the decision of positive or negative, it must be fit what we needed it. It shouldn't be overrated and it shouldn't be like an underrated. Another simple things like an adjustable hospital bed. If you visited any patient's ward, you have electronically powered devices. Electrical adjustable hospital beds, they are considered as a class 1, but the more if I added more power, more smartness, more advancement on it. For example, the labor bed is not considered as a class 1, but the patient beds are considered as a class 1. And then dental chairs, all these things. So these studies are still going on it. And there are other kind of instruments called exceptional and adjustable. For example, some gamma radiation devices we can consider as a class 4, or breast implants are class 4, because these radiation devices, when we mounted on the cancer patient, it releases the radiations. As the radiations is not only going to affect the patient, it also going to affect the user who is going to work with the patient. So it's considered as a class 4 here. And some kind of devices, they use recombinant DNA technology in the name of in the name of biosensors. If you're not careful, that can also affect both the users and the technicians working with that one. Of course, autoclaves are very popular one, right? Every hospital you visited, they have smaller version of autoclave, or CSD, a bigger version of autoclave, and that devices must be class 2. Why? In the sense of autoclave is the one is going to confirm the sterility of the surgical tools you are using it. If these devices, when they have the heating filament, is not heating up to that standard, and you consider it as a sterile, maybe the sensors are showing fine, but the heating filaments are not good, or they didn't design the sensors a graded one that can give you a wrong sterilized procedures. Meanwhile, you think the gauze you are using is sterile, but because of autoclave not designed according to the standard, it can introduce a pathogen. It can introduce a failure sterility here. So there is something like a number of rules. Any medical devices that is a material intended to be sold to the healthcare professionals or dispensed for specific purpose of configurations or arrangement into mold or shape to meet the need of individual, classified in the class that apply finished medical devices. For example, there are a lot of classes can be keep on come on it. Of course, they are trying to use the 4 classes to fix them, but still some classes are come on it. They call them as unidentified classes. Still they are working on it, how to handle those unidentified classes, because customized devices. The more important one, this is very important one, is an IVD devices. The IVD devices have their own branches and they have their own classifications. What the IVD means, like test kits. In Ghana recently they have started manufacturing their test kits, but before COVID wasn't like that. We used to buy test kits from China. We used to buy test kits from India. We used to buy test kits from Europe. And we are not sure those test kits are really manufactured according to our standards. What if it happened, they are giving false positive or false negative? Test kits, you all aware, it is not the meant for diagnosis, rather it's meant for screening. During COVID time, we have abused the test kits rather using for diagnosis. You say COVID positive or COVID negative. But ultimate for COVID confirmation is the real-time PCR. But during the COVID, because of the time and the resource, if the test kits pass through, you are positive or negative. So this where if something wrong in this manufacture, someone may be in a positive because the test kit didn't prepare and didn't show it. That's why the false positive and false negatives can show up on the test kit. It's a big challenge for the country because test kits comes in a container. 40-feet container will have 50,000, 40,000 boxes of test kit. And there are only few batches are manufactured according to the standard. The rest are not manufactured to the standards. It can give you a low, the sense of I'm doing breast cancer screening for the whole country. Because I've trusted on this test kits or failure on it, I may miss some of the positive cases on that one. So the country FDA is very serious about the IVD things. In fact, the FDA in Ghana, they have reached the maturity level 3 on test kits. So in vitro test kits are meant for diagnosis, screening, monitoring, predisposition. Sometimes some things you want to throw out of it. You want to be confirmed that it's not having any pathogens. You need the test kits to confirm that. Or prognosis before it comes. Or predictions. You may even predict some kind of conditions can be pop up. You can use it. For example, a bird flu can become in this country. What will happen? You can form test kits for that one and predicted that earlier and starts to do the prevention for the country. And then the determinations. All these things. A device that use inventory in vitro in purposely for examination of specimens which is taken from the body. For example, blood fluids, saliva, nozzle discharges, tears, cerebrospinal fluid, any fluid I remove from the patient outside, then use the test kits to measure them. And test kits have their own classification. They have their class A, class B, class C, and class D. Here the risk level is not based on the patients, rather it's based on the person, lab technicians or nurses who are working with that place. So you can look around the class A, both individual and public health, they are low. So specimen receptacles, clinical chemistry analyzers or culture media, these are the examples of low IVD devices. Of course, you have an idea of the chemistry analyzers. So if you look around any clinical laboratory in the hospital, they take hundreds of samples and run them the chemistry analyzers. And then if you look around the type class B, individual have moderate one, but the public health is low, which means vitamin B12, pregnancy self-testing kits, anti-nuclear antibodies, urine test strips, where the technician have chances. Because the patient just bring the sample and leave it to their lab. It is a technician who take time to use his gloves and face mask, and still when he is trying to use an anti-nuclear antibody, which means a nucleus, active nuclear compound in that test kit, when the person is performing it, accidentally he has removed the mask and trying to attend the call, this radioactives or the droplets can reach to him, have their, moderate risk for him. But the C and the D, as D considered as everything is high, like a HIV based test kits or some kind of blood screening test kits, RDT test kits, or hepatitis virus. Some of the virus which don't have the vaccine treatment, they are like in a test, falls under the D risk, because both the public level and the technicians are high. When you look for the C, which is risk, individuals have a higher risk compared to the public health, which has a moderate one. Here the summarize of regulations, what regulations actually they are doing it. If you are a new engineer, you have very wonderful ideas and you're able to convince the prototype with some sponsors. And once you're able to get the funding for your idea, you start to do the manufacturing. But when you manufacturers will follow there some guidelines. FDA is not going to give the guideline for medical devices, but they have ISO standard for them, international standard organizations. They have different standard. One is 9001 certificate. For medical devices, we have something called ISO 13485. So when I'm manufacturing it, I follow this good manufacturing practice ISO 13485, which means FDA is little bit tension rest because you follow a standard one. then whatever data you are producing during your productions, you must bring and submit to me. Then when you submit it as in a document, then I can also do certain tests, compare the results, and the results are acceptable ranges. Then I can give the certificates. I will show you what actually they do it. The role of regulations is they need a documents for before you are submitting the devices and after approval also. You have two documents. One, the document as an input for the FDA to show how did you do the designs, the patterns, and the engineers worked on it, and the materials you collected and the source of materials. And then another important thing is, as I mentioned, quality and evaluation of samples. As I mentioned, ISO and ACity are so many things. Or World Health Organization also give you certain kind of manufacturing methods here, procedures. So you follow this quality, how quality manufacturing methods did they use on it. Then clinical trial reports. There are two kinds of clinical trial reports. You can perform the clinical trial reports in institutionals, or sometimes FDA itself have the clinical trial reports. They can take your device, perform the clinical trials, and generate the results out of that one. And then they can audit the manufacturing facility. There are two groups in FDA. One, they call them as a regulators who regulated the standard procedure. Another one who call them as an inspectors. They can walk any of these manufacturing institutions and visually observe everything. Then they write the report and bring it to the FDA for a further process. There's another one is called the post-market surveillance. What's the meaning of post-market surveillance? Means as FDA has approved, go and manufacture this type of condom. But after 3 years, within these 3 years, every month they can go and collect the batch from their manufacturers and they make sure they perform the test. Because if I'm producing a batch of it and it has to be passed to the test, we make sure that that month, whatever you produce, you follow that procedure. So we call them as post-market surveillance. And there's FDA also have another one called import and export control. What's the meaning of import control? If you are importing a medical devices, you need to bring your FDA certificates before the device will be reached to their facility. If the FDA certificates are not provided, they can keep it at the detention spot, then you bring the certificate before they release the good. So it is clearly shows that the FDA has a control in one at the airport and another one at the seaboards, where the FDA certificates must be provided before the goods can be released on it. So they are playing the major role. Still now, they are, as per Africa, this is a landlocked countries. Though the FDA have that seaside and the airport side, but still there are a lot of road transportation. People can bring their medical devices pass through that road. If you look for Burkina Faso, more than 5 routes they can enter inside. Togo, Aflao border, they have other routes they can enter inside. Anyone can bring any of their blood glucose monitors. Those are not passed through the FDA and they can bring and sell it to the country. So process like registrations, they have to register your product first. And after, you submit the applications, the applicants submit the completed application, documents, samples, testing samples, and the batch numbers, everything. Then they also submit evaluation of the applications. They have to evaluate. There are two kinds of evaluations. As a manufacturer, you have to do internal evaluation of your own product with your report. Then the FDA also evaluate your product. We compare them. And then product registrations committee meeting will be happen. And that meeting, they will say that they don't disclose the product name or the manufacturers. They rather have their ID for that one. If the ID have all the results and they are satisfied with, they will provide the certificate for them for 3 years. If it's not, then they give a first 1 or 2 warnings, in the sense the first warning let you know that values are wrong. So they give you some 6 months to come back and try with the one which has been corrected. And still it has been repeated, they will cancel the product registrations. So some people smart enough to get a new registrations for that one. And the final decision is the CEO take the decisions whether they can accept this client product or not. There are some times when the final decisions are failed due to the CEOs are refused to accept that one. They have their timeline, as I mentioned. Processing the applications will take 6 months, and the applicant must be required provide additional data within 12 months. And then in case the additional time is required, then you write a formal request for that one. And the product registrations will be valid for 3 years, which means if we give the license is meant for only 3 years, you can't use it that one more than 3 years, which means you offend the crime on that one. Of course, if you are someone who is bringing the product from outside the country, you have import license that can validity for 1 year. Yes, please. You have to go for a renewal, like your license. Once your license is expired,
Same thing again?
no need to be. There are procedures that you can get, because once you are on that same stream, unless you are not updated, you are upgraded your devices. If you did any upgraded, it's a new product line.
Okay.
So here, if it's in a class 1, the charges for $180 registration charges. If it's a class 2, 300, class 3, 400, class 4 is 600. If it's locally produced, which means 750 Ghana cedi. So on-site testing fees like bulky devices, big MRI machines you are bringing it, I want to test it, on-site one, they charge you 3,000 Ghana cedi. If it's an auditing for foreign facility within Africa, maybe there are some cases, Kenya, Rwanda, they are very popular now in producing medical devices, and the FDA want to approve for that license, they can travel for out of Africa, within Africa. So their charges is $8,500, which is outside African continent, which is $10,500.
I guess FDA has not heard it's supposed to charge in cities, huh?
They can give that day. And this is the registration documents. All these things I have provided, I can share you those links. You can download them and follow those things. Registration documents like, cover letter. Anything you submitted, you must have a cover letter from your manufacturers. Or there are some cases, manufacturers are not necessarily come from Ghana, but they have their local agents. They can write a cover letter with the manufacturer, license with the manufacturers, and get their certificate. Approach for the registration. And completed application form. There's like 5 pages application form, and certificate of analysis report, manufacturing license to be provided, and that license must be updated. Contract agreement between their local agents and the international one, and then sterility report, because all medical devices, sterility report is very valid for now. In a registrations, they must also consider as a risk analysis report. I have explained detail about the type of stability report. The stability report is very important because every medical devices have their shelf life. For example, if I buy these things, within 6 months I have to use it, but still some hospital, they are using it for a long time. So stability reports depend on this one, humidity, temperature, pressure, everything. And that report must be matched your shelf life. And device verifications and validations, where verifications and validations taken by demonstrate the compliance of the device. Essential principles should be provided where it's applicable. We also have something for software verifications and validations. Some softwares can easily get outdated within 6 months, so they have to be validated that. And clinical evaluation report if it's applicable. Like you see that complex class 2, class 3, class 4, they demands the clinical evaluations. They have both pre and post marketed clinical data. Labeling is another important factor here. When you bring any devices, the label must be clearly mentioned, class 1 or class 2 or class 3, the shelf life and their manufacturing date, and apart from that, which country is origin. There is one Kenyan company, Vayu Bubble System, during the COVID time. They were able to design this one because we know all the CPAPs demands an electrical driven one. Or sometimes it needs some kind of external air. But this company able to successfully manufacture without needed electricity, without needed any pressure. By using the Boyle's law, able to increase the pressure inside. They able to design it something for neonatal, very delicate, and successfully registered their product, and they are also able to successfully register in this country. So this is a successful story of it. And they have got their license, and again they have applied for the upgraded one. This cost, a normal CPAP cost $10,000. For this people one, It won't even cost more than $300. They are able to, as a biomedical engineer, not necessarily biomedical engineer, as a team worked in a way how they can provide a cheaper devices that can match the FDA regulations and still provide effective treatment in the hospital in a low middle income countries. Yes, it's available here. This is one of the stories. There are so many things like hemophiles, a list are available in their website. So I've done my presentation here. I think I've done it before that time. So let me take your questions. I can write it down. Some I try to explain. We can have a contact.
I'm not an engineer, but I'm sitting here thinking whether somebody should go and read the stuff before you come up with your idea or trying to tailor it, because it seems so complex.
I think it's a good point. Like anytime you train the medical engineers, they know when they are reaching to their corner, dead end. If you better train from the dead end, then they can start to run without any barriers. So it is important to have the regulations of our country, because you are working here. You're supposed to know who is going to control you. If you are designed according to their demands and still you're able to catch up the solution for their hospital, I mean, your products easily get to the people. Please.
Does the FDA have an enforcement arm? And what happens if, I mean,
Yeah, they have an enforcement. Yes, yes, they have it. They have a public domain. FDA has something like a mobile app. You realize a particular device you are using, you are not happy with that one, you can go and lodge the complaint, and those complaints are taken and they are looked for the manufacturers who supplied that batches. Like test kits, IVD test kits. So right now they have a criminal offenses. And FDA also chasing around this herbal medicine people. Most of the herbal medicines, they use their own machines. Anytime when you approach them, they give a machine to test. They let you know what is your liver, what is your head, all those kind of information. That device is not FDA approved. So FDA is trying to chase them and bring them down on those machines are not registered by
They
FDA.
need to speak to the radio stations. That's all I hear.
So that is going on.
Radio stations, I mean, they have a machine, and you have a population that is not very literate, and you come over and it can tell you every disease you have. And I'm always wondering, like, how are they able to get away with this? You know, they need to chase them.
So please.
So one of the requirements for the processing of the regulation, I saw that there is a clinical evaluation. So that means they have to go through clinical trials and everything. But like in order for you to go through clinical trials, you also have to get maybe like documents from the government. So do you go to the government first to say, okay, I want to do clinical trials for my product that I want to release during this duration of time, or how is the process?
So the normal process, for example, if you have new devices and you want to make sure that devices how is going to work in the real patients, though you have done a lot of simulations, but still you want to make sure how is going to be. Then we have institutional ethical review board in every institution. For example, if you decided you want to perform your test in UGMC, University of Ghana Medical Center, they have clinical trial centers. Of course, they haven't established, but that's how it's supposed to be work. They have a clinical trial centers where the patients are voluntary to take your devices and work with that and generate the data for you. And you have that device data as a manufacturer. Then when you give it to the FDA also have the clinical trial testing the laboratory. They perform the same things. When their data are matched, that's fine. For example, RDT test kits I want to perform, I can't worry every patient to give their blood sample. I know the microscope is an alternative method. So I can use a microscope and your test kits to compare that one. Yes, there are so many ways. You have gold standard procedure devices are there. Real-time PCR is good enough for play with the RDT kits. So I can test with that, and I have been confirmed this clinical trial report is enough.
So we know that it takes about 10 to 15 years for drugs want to ask if same applies to these instrumental devices because then for a drug to be approved by any FDA board, it has to take a lot of clinical trials and a long number of years. So depending on the type of class of the instruments being produced, whether it's invasive or non-invasive, does it take a really long time for the approval to happen, or how does it work?
No matter how innovations you call yourself in that medical device designs, still it follows something influence from some other instrument, right? So that device, that instruments are already have their clinical reports. Okay, for example, we can use this Vayu gas, I mean the Vayu CPAP. The innovation is the principle how they are using it, but the application is still going to be the same neonatals, right? So which means I already have preclinical data set for that devices they are using it. Then I can use some simulations. Okay, I can explain like this. There are third parties as a consultancy. When you approach them, they can perform all the biocompatibility tests for your devices. You are only good in designing them, manufacturing them, but you don't want to take the challenges of it. There are some third party consultancy can take your device, do the clinical trials or do other test reports and generate the data and give it back to you. And that data you can submit to the FDA for approval. That's one way. Before, as you mentioned, 10 to 15 years, it will take some new technology to come up. But now it's not like that. We are in an artificial intelligence era where certain algorithms or iteration process can really show the data ahead of you. It makes your decision whether you can use it or not. Yes, please.
Are there any overlaps or any collaboration between the FDA and the Ghana Standards Authority?
As a technical committee member, they have never disclosed those informations to me. But I can see there's a working, they are working certain things, but they have their boundaries on it. So Ghana standards look around the manufacturing process, but they don't look around who is going to use it, where they are going to use it. But the FDA is the one who really concerned about the public health.
So if I am a student or I'm designing a new thing, I have to go, so what are the steps? I go to the FDA standards or which way?
As a manufacturers, you have a manufacturing standard procedures like ISO 13485 as listed is for medical devices. You follow that one. Then your institution will be certified by the Ghana standards if you are in Ghana. Or if you are in Europe, you have a European standard. Or if you're in India, you have an Indian standard. They are certified. So though there are certifications, you have it, but the product you are selling is in Ghana. So FDA has to come and cross-check all those documents before they give the license.
The clinical trial, like how do you wait?
The clinical trials depend on the classifications you have seen it. So if it's in a classification 1, no need too much clinical trials like in a toothbrush for normal one. But I'm designing a toothbrush which is going to release certain drug for those who have oral cancer, which means that clinical trials are totally different for that one. So clinical trials have some flexibilities. We don't have a fixed clinical trial for all devices. That's one.
So do you test it on people?
They test it. They test it with their consent. They will ask you, I'm going to test this thing. Lot of hospitals they are doing, as this morning, there's a speaker discussing about certain medical devices they are testing, which means it's a part of clinical trial with their hospital consent, with the ethical review will analyzes everything about your devices. They give the approval, go and do the testing. Because they have mentioned there's a safety on it, how they are testing it. They generate all those data, but not necessarily all data will be shared in a public domain because it's in a competitive world. Certain data has been kept by the manufacturers, only given to the FDA with a disclosure agreement.
That's where you have to collaborate with the people who are going to use your device. So come up with something, and you have to get physicians and convince them that this would work, and then they have to get the patients to try your device. And that's where you're talking about the clinical trials. So you have to come up with a commission and let the patient know, by the way, this is a new thing coming. I think it's going to work. Can you try it? And let me see how it works for you, right? So the clinical trials, for example, are not done on children. They cannot give informed consent. right? So a lot of stuff, those drugs and things are on adults who can give permission. Children do not. Some clinical, a lot of clinical trials are not done on pregnant people. So you don't have, most of the data you have about pregnant people are inferred. They are not, who wants to be the mom? Who wants to be the guinea pig? Pregnant people, I don't want to be. So you don't have data like that, right? So that's how that works.
I think, as you mentioned, the pregnant women or neonatals are very sensitive. So clinical trials are tried to as much avoid to apply on those things. Even though you design for them, they try to use simulations that can generate the results out of that one. There are a lot of innovative ideas to protect them or save them, but still it is at the clinical trial they are working on it. So this is another barrier for the manufacturers. They have wonderful ideas, but because of the clinical trial challenges, they are still lies on their documentary. Yes.
Yeah, so a situation where probably maybe my product doesn't have to rush to the human trials. Perhaps I have to do some kind of studies that would include cell or biology, bacteria.
Biocompatibility.
And here comes a case where I do not have the facility. So the regulatory bodies, do they have specific parastatals where researchers can actually come in and then play before we can get a good data, before we can actually try to do human trials?
So you are designing something you are going to make profit.
Yeah.
So as long you are looking for a profit, regulations are not going to worry about whether. So it is your responsibility to do your data and bring actually to me. This is what you get it.
But
So
we are
I
still
mean,
in the science level, and we are students with the faculty.
you want to get driving license. No, you want to get a driving license. So you want to come to the DVL office, someone inspector, ask him to give his personal car that you want to drive and show him you are driving it. That's a risk for everyone. Because if something went wrong, you will be run away from that. But the FDA will be in a trouble. FDA also having auditing. If a FDA audited by IMRDF, Institution for Medical Device Research Unit, the bigger people like World Health Organizations, they will come and check whatever the FDA was doing the whole year, auditable for that one. If I'm a FDA, I'm trying to work for you and give you the data, something went wrong in the hospital, you will be say that it's not my responsibility, FDA who gave the data for me, which means they have to answer for that one. So they can't take risk of manufacturers. They can validate your result, but they can't work for your results.
I think my problem is that the driving environment to do some of these investigations. In the past, I've been working on cancer, breast cancer to be specific, and the whole idea is targeted liver. And it was difficult to even be able to do that in Africa. The only place I had the approval was Worcester Polytechnic, where we have to now do the first animal trial. And so look at what it takes to be able to do that. And so if there was an environment that can create that avenue for me, it will be less cheaper, and even you'll be able to train more on that area than you civilly.
You want the government to be altruistic, right?
But I just wanted to commit
Yeah.
to help, because in Nigeria they have these government consultants, and a lot of them. And you can go with students, what they just need is a bench fee, and they will guide you, set up, get your work done. But in Ghana, we struggle to be able to, if your university doesn't have such a facility, you are just limited. And if you can't do the good science, you can't even think about the money, because the science has to work before I can think of the product itself. So that is our challenge.
So what agency in Nigeria is doing that? Who's in charge of what you're talking about?
Come again.
I said, what agency in Nigeria is?
So there's quite a lot. One of them is Shutter Science and Technology, which is a government-owned research center. And then we have NASENI, National State Agency for something. So
that's a special project.
Yeah, so there are a lot of them. They are just spread all over Nigeria, and they give that opportunity to researchers, students, lecturers to come in.
But the answer, when he was talking about it takes 10 to 15 years for drugs to come to market, that is the argument that the drug companies make for why their drugs are so expensive in the US. So they come out with a drug, and they charge us gazillion dollars for it. And when you make the argument, they say it costs me this much for R&D, and therefore I must recoup my money. And they have a patent for a certain number of years, and nobody can make it, and so they get their money, and then people can make it in their basements. But until then, they charge whatever they want, whatever they can do. There was a drug that was an orphan drug when I was a medical student, when I was a resident, that we didn't use for anything. And then somebody did research, thought it was good for preterm labor, and a company bought the drug. It could be made, compounded in the pharmacy for a vial of 5 cc's, $80. They went and basically lobbied, and it was approved, packaged nicely, and was being charged $3,000 a vial. And when the argument from the doctors came up, they said, but when you deliver a preterm baby, it costs you $1,000 a day, therefore it's not a bargain. After arguing and arguing and arguing, they sold it for $400. You could get it from India for $2 a vial.
It's because of the population.
No, because they could make it, because it was an old drug, so they couldn't have a step on it. But the companies, there are people who work, who do what you're talking about, the clinical trials. So if you get it and you don't have access to it, you pay them, you have to pay them. They will not do it for free. You pay them and they'll collect the data for you, and then you will do it. And they have nurses who go around, they find places to test the drug for you. It's all cash.
So as you mentioned, you have challenges of clinical trial. Then you don't need to look for class 3, class 4. Rather, you can design yourself class 1 to class 2 range, which has a less clinical trial report expected on that one.
That's
So
what I'm
that's
saying,
it.
that if someone is coming out with something, think for the low-hanging fruit, don't go for the
Complex one. And once you establish and you are really making more money out of that one, you can establish your own lab. You can even help others to work in that one. Yeah.
So just like drugs, you need to convince the physicians or the doctors prescribing the drugs that your drugs actually work. So pharmaceutical companies like Novartis, when they make a drug and the FDA approves it, they have to now sensitize the doctors about the fact that, okay, this drug can work in curing malaria. But then you also have to watch and prevent influencing the doctors, because you're trying to make money out of the drug, and you telling the doctors that this drug is working, it means that you want the doctors to stop prescribing the other drugs and prescribe yours.
There used to be a rule against that. There used to be a rule, there used to be a rule where you have to influence the doctors. So they'll come around our offices and, I have this new drug, this is great, let me give you a few samples. People like shiny things. Then the Supreme Court said that there used to be a ban against advertising of drugs on TV. Now, in the evening, everything is on there. I remember a long time ago, during Barack Obama's thing, I remember this, an advertisement for, what was the first drug for erectile dysfunction? Viagra. The little blue pill came on TV, and they were talking about, my daughter goes, Mom, what is this? I was like, but now they put it on TV. So as a physician, your patients now come, and they go, I want this new drug. I want this one. And if you are in an office, it's probably worse here, where you have a polyclinic with 100 patients and stuff, and if you have the means for stuff, it's only the ethical doctor who will listen. The one you're taking works just as well. Continue that. It is very easy in a place where somebody, I have insurance, I can pay for it. You just write it for them, and that's how it's uptake now. You don't have to come and tell the doctors what to do. It's patient-driven now, okay? Where they do, sort of like my little friend here who says, can you buy me this asthma drug from the US? And I go, but you have it in Ghana, it's cheaper. But the US one is better.
How would you convince a hospital to use maybe a certain new type of dialysis machine, just as, or they'll be having some advertisement just like these drugs on the TVs?
That kind of advocacy, I think as regulators, we don't have any hands on that one. DVLA can't tell that by BMW we will give you, it is as an institutional, you know what's your budget plan for that one, and you know which one can do best for you. That's where the biomedical engineers in their in-house who have been trained on that, they know how to select the best one for that one. So you know what you like it. But for me, I must make sure that whatever you buy it can really match that public health or not. have to be given. I mean, if it's in a national procurement policies, they have to make sure that the device you are buying for your institutions must be strict with the FDA license one. That's I can responsible. I can issue the certificate for the product, but I can't influence like whether you buy this A or B or C.
I think as regulators, all they do is to like certify your product, saying that your product does what it says it's going to do. For people to buy in, then you have to market it. So now you need to develop your commercial aspect of the venture. So after designing your product, certifying it to the regulators, now you need to commercialize it. So getting people to use a new innovation that you've come out with, you need to now engage the market. And sometimes in the product design, once you have a good or something that is showing promise, you need to start doing your market study right from there, even as you are going through the regulatory processes, so that by the time you get the final regulatory certification, at least you have some contact with marketing and just commercialize it.
Yes, please.
So the one speaker mentioned the new paradigm where the Ghana Standards Authority, if your product is licensed or has approval from the United States, they will accept it here. The previous speaker. Does the FDA have the same? Is there reciprocity? If the Ghana FDA has approved it, they will also accept it in the US.
Oh, no, they're not.
Not necessarily. If you no, there is an article published. If it's an FDA in US FDA approved, doesn't mean it has to work in every country. As I said that the shelf life depend on the humidity, temperature, everything. When it's come to here, it's totally a different ball game. So FDA has to cross check that one before they give their license for that.
But they give it some leeway.
Yeah, there is some kind of softness on it because they know that it has been passed through the procedure. But that is not the only option to take that give the permission for that. They have to cross check. I mean, oversights can happen in industry. If you are producing like thousands or millions of condoms every month, FDA has to take like 1,500 to 2,000 samples to do what you call it, the freedom of hold test, water stability test, time to time. So in the lab, someone has to tear the condoms and fill the water and test it for every batches. For a day and night, they are doing it because they want to make sure that it's confirmed. Not necessarily a big brand, you have to just pass through it. They have to do their work. That is what part of a post-market analysis. They will get there and take it from your own licensed product. And sometimes they can walk randomly inside the institutions and bring the samples and they perform that one.
They actually do that.
Yes, they actually do that.
So to follow up with this question, if I am a Ghana engineer, I make something locally for Ghana, that means that that's it. Maybe regionally, that's it. It's not going to go anywhere else. Maybe other countries like India, Costa Rica, other low resource countries.
With Kenyan product, I show it there, the Wayu one. Once they are in Africa, doesn't mean you have to allow in Ghana. They again pass through the whole FDA regulation checks before they are given on it. So it means you design something doesn't mean you can sell it to Burkina Faso. They also have their checks. So
I think you're thinking outside of Africa. Or you're thinking
I mean,
but what's the point of all these treaties then? Why am I
it,
part
it,
of WTO, that? What's the point?
but it's in a product, right? So we have to take responsibility as in a product. Not necessarily like we have, who knows if something, a failure may happen in that productions.
But I just feel like there should be, I mean, if I am, if my FDA here has accepted it, they've gone through this rigorous training, I have to go to another 10 years, 5 years, another, see, it's silly.
I think for the regulators, they've been struggling internationally to have standardization. Even between the US and Europe, there is that problem. A product will be licensed in US, but the European medical agency will also have to register it. So
That is true.
yes, it's something. Though you have having one registration in one region may fast track the process a bit. They know that at least you've gone through some of the steps, but definitely they will take the product and they will run their own tests on it. And I think if I heard Prof. Alex Dodo said it set up this African medical agency. If that is going to be regulatory and it's going to work within that framework, then perhaps we may be able to standardize medical products. If they are going to go into regulation of medical devices, then we can say that if you are registered with that, then within the African free continental free trade area, you can market your product. If that is going to happen, then that will be fine.
Yes, answer for me. So,
So for online platforms like Alibaba and Jumia, where you can order such devices with personal devices for this the device that you can use to check your heart rate and all. Those devices are imported from outside. So who bears or whose importer license is used to get that device in China?
Alibaba Expresses, when you try to bring them for your personal one, fine, you can use it. But if the moment you order for 5 units and when it gets to the port, the airport authorities will ask you to come and bring the certificate for that one. Because they know that your intention is for commercialization. You can use it for study purpose, but the moment you order more than 10 pieces or something, you raise a flag there. Are you trying to sell these things? Then where is the name? It's so recently, the Samsung smart watches. Before, I mean, we use it for blood pressure and oxygen measurements. Before, they don't call it for diagnosis purpose. It's just you are using it to know that. But recently, they have got the approval from FDA. You can use it for diagnosis, which means they have took all this years to work on it to generate the clinical data, everything, and they have convinced us, and now they can use it for your measuring the pulse. So very soon, like most of this kind of Fitbit wearable devices will get the approval from there. Then you can use it for your family or personal diagnosis purpose.
What if you are a researcher, but then you've been inventing a lot of things, but on one try, you invented something that mistakenly came out extremely dangerous. Will your license be completely seized, or like there will be some regulations to that?
You are inventor, you have started to produce, your invention is still under the prototype, right? It has passed to the manufacture process.
It's already in the custodian.
So it's been, people are using it here.
No, you sent it for testing, but then you realize that it's doing more harm than the good you intended for it to do. So then your license will be seized.
But you are not registered yet.
Yeah, you haven't done the registration. You have to do the registration before you issue the license. By you yourself, you know it is going to do something wrong. What if your family member is going to use that one? Are you okay with that? So think yourself. I mean, it's an accidentally happened. So you have to bring that and fix the loopholes before you send it back for the registration.
So there's no thing out like
You are only in a registration process. You are not even get the certificate, license. Registered doesn't mean you are entitled for a license. Yes. No questions, right?
Okay, then I think it will be a follow-up to this question. I think with the facility where I was working, a company used to supply us with lotion for scans. Before they came to advertise their products, we asked for their registration from FDA, which within a year they provided, and the lotion was working very well. But within 1 year, 2 years' time, when you use the lotion, you begin having some kind of reactions. So in the context of
Lotion for scan. Is it the gel?
the gel.
Electrode gel.
Yes,
Very
the
good.
gel.
The gel has an shelf life. Even though they mention the shelf life, it's just closed. You are not sealed it. But the moment you open, your shelf life also will be changed on it. So it won't work effective for you. Like electrode gels, if you use in our lab, if I use within few weeks, since you left it open and closed it, the gel electrolytes won't be active.
Just one-time use for each patient, so they are just in small bottles that you can just.
A small cubes. Of course, you have the shelf life. And did they mention the shelf life? So when you realize this is a problem, you have all rights to lodge the complaint with the pictures. I mean, there's an authorities will take the immediate action of that one, because gel is very vital for scanning the abdomen, and gels are not providing that closed conductivity zone. which means I may not get proper images out of that one. So that gels need to be replaced with a new one.
All right, shall we clap for
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe the topic is interesting, and if we leave you, we will stay on and on and on. But I know that the day is also old. We need to at least take care of ourselves. And we have two young ladies out there to lead us to the lunch. So I'll believe that we end here, and thank you for leading
Thank
us very much. Sure. So